Hi, Elspeth.
Hello, Melanie.
Welcome to Oslo.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
Yeah, so how many times have you been here now?
Oh, a lot.
Okay, you can't even count them.
I wouldn't remember.
No.
I have been a lot of times and love it. And I usually meet families as families. And if the child's been, or the network is worried, I also tend to include the network in that first meeting. And normally what I try and do, because particularly if there is violence or abuse, these are very, very tender, sensitive issues. For the child, they're terrified if they say anything, or if anybody knows. So they're often quite, petrified, quite silent. Answer, don't know, I don't know. Parents are also frightened that they're going to be found out, that the child might talk, that their whole family is going to break apart. Father might have to go to prison, or mother might have to go to prison. So it's a very sensitive, particularly, if there are suspicions of this happening in the wider system. So I tend to talk to the child first, just for a few minutes, and ask them if things are happening to them that shouldn't happen to children.
Okay, but do you ask them in front of everybody?
No,
okay.
On their own. I say, let's have 5 minutes first. If I've just assessed and I'm a little unhappy, I might just do an ordinary session. And I guess in that ordinary session, I would tend to look at the family's strengths and competence and resilience.
Yeah. So when you talk with the child before the family session, then the child knows that you're going to have a family session after the meeting.
Absolutely.
And so what are your first thing you say to a child? Or
I say something like, I'll often be very close, often I'll put my hand on their knee and say, life feels as though it's been very tough for you. And it feels, and there's a few concerns about, that things are happening that shouldn't be happening to children. And if there's a sense, if it's something like a child, I've seen children who've pulled all their hair out, a lot of anorexics who haven't got better over, say, 6 months. Children who are mute, children who are cutting. And I'll say, it just makes me sometimes wonder if there are things that you just can't talk about, and that things have been happening to you that shouldn't happen to children. And usually they do what you're doing, is nod away like this. And I say to them, I don't want you to talk to me unless you feel you want to. You talk when you're ready to talk. And again, you see them relax a bit. And then I say, as somebody who works for child services, my duty to you, to your family, and to everybody, society, is that you are protected. I'm not going to ask you to talk. I'm going to talk to your parents just in case there is something that's happened. If there's a 1% chance that things have happened, they would not want it to happen again. And they look a little bit frightened, but I reassure them, nobody is going to put any pressure on you. If you don't want to talk, you don't have to talk. You don't even have to let me know, how old you are, or your name or anything, because I know your name. So I'm not going to ask you any questions unless you ask me a question. So really trying to say, I'm not going to make them talk, because if they talk and it's violence, they're likely to get beaten up. If they talk and it's sex abuse, nobody's going to believe them, because father's story or mother's story is always different from a child's story. And parents' voices tend to be louder than children's voices, really. And children can be silenced, and will be silenced through threats and everything else. So, you know, I think they're very frightened to say anything. And I just keep saying, I don't want you to talk until you're ready to talk. But we will protect you in this interview. And we will work with protecting you. I'm not going to accuse anyone. I'm not going to say anything. We're going to work on an as-if basis. If it has happened, nobody would want it to happen again. Protection, and in a sense being above suspicion, which is very powerful, because again in these meetings you can be very, very warm, very friendly to all the family members, so that they feel a little more relaxed, a little less aggressive. And say, you know, in my clinical experience, when children are behaving the way your child is behaving at the moment, things have been happening to them that shouldn't happen to children. This could be sex abuse, it could be violence. It's not something they feel they can talk about at the moment, and we've got to respect that. And I want all of you to respect that. But as a health professional working with children, I have to make sure your daughter is safe. It's usually a daughter or a son. And I sort of say, you know, I'm really glad. Usually I work with the school and wider system first, and talk about, has she any male teachers, and what are they, how could school manage this? What
manage
happens?
this, that means manage the symptoms, or manage the suspicion?
Manage the men, because they've also got to protect the men in their system.
Protect the
male teachers.
The male teacher, okay.
Because we know that children who've been abused, I'm not sure I'd say this, tend to be at risk of being abused again and again. Because they're sort of early sexualized. So they may become very flirtatious with these teachers or whatever, because of their earlier experiences. Or teachers might be, you know, keen on kids. So how can we make sure she's never alone with one of the male teachers? Is there another female teacher she could have for the same subjects? Then we talk about what's going to happen in the playground, what happens when she goes to the toilet at school, what happens before school, what happens after school, so that her whole school day is covered. And then I usually say to the teachers, I know how busy you are, you know, let's meet again in 6 weeks' time, but thank you so much for coming. And they leave, so that gives the family a little more privacy.
Okay, because do you have the Child Protection Agency also
Always.
together
Yeah.
with you in the meeting?
Yeah.
But you are leading the meeting as a child psychiatrist, or how do you?
I lead the meeting because we've got no evidence, and I always have somebody from Child Protection there, so that they can make the assessments, not me. You know, they can say we've got to proceed with this or not, and usually we agree. and very rarely at these meetings do we actually go for prosecution or go for, including the police. So we then go on with the family, and she is there, well, it's usually she is there with me, and we go on talking about how can this child be free and protected. And I say to the father and to any brothers, do you know, I am so glad I'm not a man, because we know that, and I'm not a father or a brother, because we know most abuse happens in the family. So you have got to be purer than pure, whiter than white. And over the next, we found it takes about 6 weeks, so I now say about 6 weeks, but we will be there with you. You must never be alone with your daughter, or any of your daughters if there are several, or your son if it's the boy that we're worried about. And then just going through the day, so who wakes the children up? Who's there for breakfast? Who takes them to school? And you see these children who, to begin with, are right down like this. They don't want eye contact, they're scared stiff. And slowly they come up, and then they start contributing. And will sort of say, well, you know, Mum does go to work on a Saturday morning, so okay, thanks for that. You know, that's very useful information. So what is going to happen? Can you stop for the time being your work on a Saturday morning and maybe make it a morning when your daughter's at school? So we go over every part of the day until, you know, the father realises this. Say, so what do you do when the child comes home from school? Oh, she and I sit on the sofa and watch television. What do you think I'm going to say about that? So I bring up every sort of possibility. Who helps her with her homework? Where do you do it? Is it in the sitting room? Is your wife there? Could you do maybe the cooking and she helps her with the homework? So you're doing sort of every moment of the day. And usually what we create is very protective mothers, but also very protective fathers, because they are also protecting themselves. And the protection is, I must not be alone with her.
Okay. But and if you had a boy, how would you do it?
In the same way.
But with the protect them.
Then maybe you've always got to be together.
Yeah, always two parents together.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if that's not possible, can you go to grandparents? Could we have a meeting with your grandparents, your brothers and sisters, uncles, aunts, whoever, so that we can make sure this youngster feels safe. And the body language, I watch body language always very, very closely, particularly of the young people. Because as soon as they don't feel safe, they go down like this again, or they move, or they you can just see that they're terrified. So they give you lots and lots of information, but they're still not going to speak.
So it's in the body.
Yeah.
And you are also physician actually, or a doctor.
Yes. Yeah.
But do you think that people who, like psychologists also, or social workers also use the body language to kind of be, to understand, or do you think that is typical?
In our clinic,
yeah.
we've got a child protection social worker in our clinic. So she usually came with me, but when she couldn't be there, I had just an ordinary social worker who was a male, who was brilliant. And because Yeah, I'm retiring. I felt it was important that he took this over, plus another girl who is really just trained as a psychotherapist, not got social work or psychology training or anything, but she's done family therapy training, and these two now are using it all the time. These other two are working. Again, we always try and include a social worker and always have two of us to really keep an eye on body language, what's happening in the communication.
Is it sometimes patients or that you have known for a while?
Sometimes,
and
yes.
then do you have their therapists with you, or how do you do it then?
Many of the people, what I call the anorexia, the pulling out hair, the hysterical paralysis, these things that haven't got better, really almost with physical medicine or with psychotherapy, then we would do this interview after, well, varying amounts of time. With hysterical paralysis, I can remember this father just screaming at me, saying, "We're not going to come and see effing shrinks, and this is just ridiculous, it's a physical problem." And I said, "You might be right." I always go neutral. You're quite probably right, but the physicians haven't been able to find anything. And I know you want to try everything. So will you just give us one chance? He said, "I'm only coming to you once." And we did this interview, and actually he was furious, very angry. But I noticed the brother was holding his chair like this all the way through. So my hypothesis was it could have been the brother. And I thought the girl was about to get out of her wheelchair and walk at the end of the interview. Because she, from having been right down here and hands over her head, and started joining in, laughing, talking. So I said to her mother, I grabbed the wheelchair and pushed her. And I said to the mother, "You should go and do some Reiki or some shiatsu, because it's very good for paralysis like this." And I had some names that I just gave her. And she rang me the next day and said she's just been to shiatsu.
Without the wheelchair?
No, she went in the wheelchair, she's now walking. I don't know whether it was your interview, because she walked to bed last night, but after she then went to the Reiki in the wheelchair, but she's now walking. And a year later, they rang me again, saying she's in a wheelchair, the physicians won't look at us. So I said, "Fine, I'll see you, but I must see you with every member of the family." And she said, "Oh, my son is just about to go to university." I said, "I don't care. If he's not there, I'm not seeing you." So I'm tough. And she rang me just before the appointment. She said, "She's walking again."
Okay.
Because I think it had probably frightened the brother. We saw that girl and her brother together, separately, for 6 months, weekly. Neither of them would talk.
After the protective interview or before?
Yes, after.
After, okay.
Neither of them would talk.
What do you think is important is to have the whole family. When you mean the whole family, because now you have all this different kind of so how do you define the people who has to come to this protective interview?
I would say the family and the wider network who are, and in this meeting with this girl who was paralysed, we also had her teachers, and she was very keen on playing tennis, that she was playing in a wheelchair. So we had the games teacher and her teacher, a social worker, and the family, which is father, mother and brother. Then, because it was so dramatic, and I didn't have a chance to say to her, are things happening to you? I just, when I was told I was given one chance, I thought, well, I'm going to go for it. Because I've had other girls with paralysis who've got better. Normally I'll get to know the family a little bit before I do this. And then afterwards thinking maybe the girl needs some help. Plus this boy, is he going to go on and abuse other children? Or has he got problems with sexuality or what? So I got the social worker, the guy to see the boy, who had great fun with him, lots of fun. He's a really good therapist. Couldn't get anything.
No.
So those two, neither of them were going to talk. And then they sort of said to us, why are we coming? I'm really enjoying school and life, and I'm playing tennis out of my wheelchair, and I haven't been back in it, and it's sitting in the corner and, folded up in the cupboard. So we gave up. And very often, some of these girls, and I had another girl, she was about 16 when we first saw her. We did a protected interview, and she was mute, but she didn't talk, even after the interview. And we didn't know who was abusing her. We thought maybe it was in the family. After about 2 interviews, her parents just said, this is a waste of time. But she came every week, and normally I see people monthly, every week for 2 years, writing in my diary, because I normally say to, would you like to see me in a month? And she'd go, 2 weeks? A week? She'd grab my diary and she'd write her name in. And she never said a word for 2 years.
Oh my God.
It nearly drove me crazy.
Yeah.
And I would sort of say, how's this week been? How are you feeling? And I noticed her last appointment, well, it wasn't her last appointment, but one appointment was on her 18th birthday. And she came in and she said, I can talk to you now. And you can do nothing about it because I'm 18, but I want you are absolutely right. I have been having a sexual relationship with my uncle. And I want him to come in and I want you to stop it. Stop it. Stop him. But you cannot go to social services, because if you go to social services, I'll deny it. Because I care about him, but I want it to stop. So I saw them both, and he said we were like 2 minor birds. Do you know minor birds are like blackbirds, Indian blackbirds, that sing beautifully. And he said we've been like 2 minor birds trapped in a cage with the door open, and I haven't been able to fly out. But if she is saying she wants it to stop now, it'll stop. And he was driving her to opera lessons. She has a beautiful singing voice. Once a week, and on the way back they would have sex in the car.
But that she told you, or he told you?
They both did.
Oh yeah.
And she tried, go on, tell her. You tell her what you've been up to. And so he started, and then she'd fill in a bit. No, it was every week, And it wasn't that comfortable.
Oh my God.
But she was adamant that it was finished, but... And she came and saw me afterwards. I said I wanted to see her in 6 weeks' time. first time she'd accept, because I was going to be on holiday, she accepted longer than a month, and she came, and I said, how are things going? She said, fine. Now I've got the power to say no, and he has to listen, because if he does it again, I'll go to social services. And I don't know, and she just wouldn't talk. And I used to think, why does she want to come here every week? And if I was on holiday or away, she went to Simon, the social worker.
Okay. Yeah. So it was something. Yeah, she didn't want to talk, but she wanted to come. But how did she? But you had. So then it's more about you, that if you hear that a young person wants to come to you, you say yes, because this is the other. We were first talking about the protective interview.
Yeah.
But here something. You did something that she could understand that it would help to come. So what do you think you've been?
That
doing?
I believed her, and that I didn't. I guess validated her. She felt safe knowing she could come. I never really asked her why she kept coming. And I did during the sessions. I used to get almost, not cross, but I used to say, you know, I'm really puzzled by why you come and sit here for an hour and you say nothing. And I talk rubbish. I sort of say, oh, how's school gone?
Yeah.
And you shrug your shoulders, and how are your parents, and what have you been doing? And
but something made her understand that you were interested in the whole, not only her, but you were interested in the family. So did you invite the whole family also?
I did, but they didn't come.
They didn't come.
No,
okay.
they said there was no change in her. She wouldn't talk at home either.
Okay, so you never had, so you didn't have the protective interview.
I did with the family initially.
Yeah.
But they didn't come on after that.
Okay, so you had them, all of them, once.
Yes. Not the uncle.
Not the uncle.
No.
No.
But I did the mother and father.
Yeah.
And she was an only child.
And the tennis. No, this is
No,
not the tennis.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so because that I think that is quite special to invite the whole system talking about something as complicated as abuse and violence, because normally the therapist or we have kind of, I have to talk alone with the kid, or I have to talk alone with the mother or the father. So that is kind of different.
I can remember in my very early days working with this, because I was living in Norfolk, which is in England, which is an area that has high levels of incest, and it's known to have high levels of incest. And I learned very early on when I can remember saying to a young girl, you know, I think you'd feel much better if you told me what happened. And I'd done this sort of protective interview, but I felt for the therapy for the girl, she needed to talk about it. Very old-fashioned ideas, but it was 20, 30 years ago. And she ummed and she awed, and she was quite a pleaser, and she said, do I really have to? And I said, well, I can't force you to do anything, but I think it'll make you feel better. Suddenly there was a big smile on her face. She said, I have a deal with you. You tell me what happened, what your husband did to you the last time he had sex with you. And I want to know exactly what he did, which is what I know you're going to ask me. Where he put his hands, his mouth, his penis, his everything. And I said, I don't think so. And she said, you therapists have to learn the difference between privacy and secrecy. This is privacy. The secrecy is that it's been a secret for a long time in the family. That I can tell you. I am not going to tell you what he did and what happened, and that is my privacy. So I normally now go very appreciative and talk about things like, how did you manage to keep a secret for so long? I can't keep one, so never tell me one. How did you manage? That shows incredible strength of character. How did you manage not to tell your mum? How did you manage not to scream at night? What were the skills you had that kept you so strong that you could cope with it? And they'll sort of say, well, you know, I didn't want to be beaten up by my dad if I screamed. Great. So you've got some sense of protecting yourself. You found a way. And did you ever show him you didn't like it? They might well say, yes, I barricaded the door, or I turned over onto my bottom, or I started kicking, or I would always wear pants and, pyjamas and everything else. Or I used to hide in the cupboard or whatever it was. So you still knew what you were doing was wrong. So you got a very good sense of morality and what is right and what is wrong. So all the time looking for how they survived, how they've managed to keep secrets, how they've managed to keep friends, go to school, do all these other things, and in many ways protect their mother from knowing.
So what are the skills of the therapist, I think, to manage to be in, to listening and to be in this difficulties with the families?
I think it's an interesting one, because I was thinking about that for this talk tomorrow, that it's often our gut reactions are fury. You know, how can somebody, if somebody knew, and in England the percentage is something like 94% of serious anorectics have been abused. If a father knew the severity of the illness, how can they dare? You know, and I can get really angry about it beforehand, but that is not going to help anybody. So it's saying, all I do, if I do that, is send people into survival mode. Then it's not going to stop. If I get cross with these fathers, if I get upset with the mothers who know but don't know. And I love Wittgenstein's ideas of saying, unless you know how to act in the future, you don't know. And for me, that's been a huge help for mums, to be able to work with them and work with them to really strengthen their ability to protect.
Talking about the future.
Talking about the future, but also believing them when they say they didn't know.
You don't have talked with mothers abusing children?
I've talked to 3 in 20, 30 years.
Because I can't understand that it can be that big difference.
I don't think there is that big a difference. I think women have a much easier time. I'm sure it is much more common because on the whole they're the ones that change the nappies and they... No, I've worked with three, a mum and 2 babysitters who were looking after younger children. And I do very similar things, but then, because it was outside the family, the children talked about the babysitters.
A woman babysitter.
Yes.
Yeah. And this mum, what was the symptoms of the children?
Constant masturbation.
Okay.
Just, and you know, okay, 2, 1, 2, maybe you're not too worried, 2 or 3. You know, you might say, put your dress down, or we do that upstairs. Not now. And having worked with the family over trying to stop this child, it didn't, and then did this, and this child who was 3 or 4, by the time said, "Mummy plays with me, that's why I do it." So it was much easier. And then getting the father to support the child and be the protective parent. So
then you had kind of a protective into as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Similar, you know, how can you make sure that you are not alone with the child? That dad is looking after her, or the 2 of you are together. And, you know, I think being humorous, keeping a very quiet, gentle voice that's understanding, caring, saying, you know, this is tough. It's very, very tough. And, you know, the dad might say, "Oh, this is ridiculous." And I agree with him. It is ridiculous. But it is a very serious situation. And, you know, your daughter is suffering because of something. And I know, as a caring parent, you don't want that to go on, do you?
So then you come to the skills of the therapist. We have to think that the parents, they don't want their kids to suffer.
Yeah.
But how can you think that when you have talked with several parents, and how can you contain this, that they don't want their kids to suffer, but still
they're making them suffer.
Yeah.
Because I always feel the world is made up of multiple stories. And although this man or this woman has got one horrendous story, and I do think it's, I do think sex abuse causes huge amounts of psychological damage. That is the one story about him. It's a big story, but it's one story. So I look for the other stories and try and bring those forth and create him as a protective father, not an abusing father.
Can you just give me an example?
Well, very often, and I work with, I'll give you an example actually. I was working with an anorectic family, and I was quite suspicious of abuse for some time. But, I think I was quite early in on these ideas that is abuse. Often anorexia, the consequence of the abuse. And I'd been working with the family. Father came every time, as did Mum. And she was getting worse, not better. So I just decided I'm going to go for it. And did a protective interview, and actually the social worker wasn't there because it wasn't planned. And in the middle of this interview, the man just said, "Do you know, Elspeth, I cannot sit here any longer. You have treated me with such dignity, such respect. I have to tell you you're right. And I am prepared to go to the well, I said to him, so if you're right, we have to stop this as a therapy session. It becomes a different sort of session. And we need to sort out what is going to happen next. Because having told me this, you've got to go to social workers or police." And he said, "I know." And he went to go and see a social worker. And then he asked me if I would go and see him with the police. And the police said, would I go on seeing him for therapy when he came out of prison? Because he would definitely get a prison sentence. And he said he felt the only person who could help him was me.
Okay, so you became his therapist?
Yeah.
And the girl?
The girl's anorexia got better.
Yeah.
And she was fine. Mother was really, took on responsibility. And that worked well. And there are lots of amazing examples.
Something happened with your brain when you heard the story that you thought that no, I have to do a protective interview. Something happened in your kind of.
There's, if one looks at one's attitudes and things, I think when I'm with a family, I can remain very calm, very, very tight. I don't let it get, "Oh, come on, you're being ridiculous." I just say, "Yeah, I know I am, but I'm afraid that's the way." So I'm no nonsense, but very appreciative, very, this is tough, very sympathetic. If I hear a story or I see somebody who is really suffering, I just feel it drives me crazy. More people don't see that it isn't a naughty girl who's pulling her hair out, or a child who is anorexic because she's a sort of, I don't know, a food freak or a whatever. These kids have suffered. And people need to know they've suffered. They need to stop being blamed and shamed. They need to be understood. And I often feel really passionately about it. And the hysterical paralysis, and I've had girls who've been on, tube feeding on one of these interviews, and they've got up and they've said they wanted the tube removed and have been fine. So I just feel so strongly about it, seeing this kid just absolutely.
So you kind of managed to be in the suffering with the kids, but at the same time to have the respect for this family.
Yeah. And realising we're all multiple storied. You know, all of us are horrible sometimes.
Yeah.
All of us are wonderful most of the time. And you know, if you talk, can you imagine, and this is where I get quite upset because people say, well, he obviously doesn't love her, or she doesn't love him, she can let it go on. Can you as a mother ever imagine that there isn't some little thread of love in your children that could be grown? Can you ever imagine a situation if they treated you really, really badly, that you wouldn't still have a tiny bit of love for them? I just cannot imagine not. I could imagine my kids might do horrible things to me, but they would always be my children. And if you can pull that love out and grow it, you're going to have a happier family.
So it's
and
kind of
happier
that
children.
you are kind of imagining the love, the small tiny love, and then it's so much easier to make it grow when you can imagine it.
Yes.
See it, then it can grow. But if you can't imagine it and see it, you can just see the not love, the monstrous, the suffering.
Yeah.
But that is the part of the multiple stories.
Yes. And to really pull out this love and focus on it and grow it and grow it and grow it for as much as you can.
So that is... so in the first meeting, I think that maybe the family is feeling also the love, kind of.
Well,
and
I think most children one sees, particularly in child psychiatry, they don't come, if they say they've been abused, it's very easy. Social services comes in, sorts it all out, you maybe do a bit of therapy. When they're not talking, you've seen them because they're anorexic, or the paediatricians think they've got some sort of, they've been treating them for months with hysterical paralysis, or, well, paralysis, not hysterical. Or the dermatologist, you've got burns all over the face or whatever. What's going on? And you might see them once or twice before you start getting a feel there's more to this than just, why would any child burn her face with acid? You know, kids aren't stupid.
But even while you think about that, you can manage to have this hope of love.
Yes.
So how do you have space to all this?
I think it's because I also firmly believe that children should be with their parents, if at all possible. And if you can pull out that love and grow it, those kids will be happier. You know, if you look at children who've been adopted, they nearly always go and try and seek who was my mum. So, and I find most of the kids that have been in foster care want to know who they have some contact with their biological parents. If we can do that without vilifying them, making them into monsters, which, you know, part of me, if I'm not speaking therapeutically, I think they are monsters, you know, in one dimension, but always to remember the multiple stories. And that the best person, 95% of the time, maybe even 98% of the time, is going to be a biological parent.
I think that is very important. That kind of, it's kind of, you have to have the hope in the love, because you know that for the kids that is really the best if they can be. So you kind of,
and you've got to draw it and draw it and draw it. And once you're beginning to draw it, more and more comes. And lots of questions about, when are you most proud of what your daughter or your son's done? What gives you most hope that they're going to get over this and really be great young people? What are your dreams for them? So that all this builds up, I want them to do this and that, and ever since they were... When was the first moment that you really fell in love with them? What was it like at their birth? How much oxytocin did you have going? And, getting grandparents to tell some of those stories. Oh, when she was little, her dad wouldn't let her go. Just adored her, never stopped. So I don't think he's ever stopped now. But there are also things that he has to stop.
I think we've been talking
a long time.
Do you know what time it is?
7:20.
Yeah. I think this has been a very nice time for me to listen to you.
I always feel so passionate about this.
Yeah,
it's something that I really feel we developed a way that a lot of people won't work this way. They feel it's too risky. And you've got to have the right psychological ability to do that.
You have to really believe in love, I think, and also that have experienced a lot of different family stories. I think that is maybe Morten. Okay, then I think it's it. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Hello. Hi, Morten. We've been doing some filming that we've just finished. Okay, well, we'll be with you in 2 minutes. Bye-bye.